The Argus hung at the edge of known space like a tired star. Its hull was scarred and its engines were older than some of the crew. Inside, lights hummed and coffee went cold. Commander Armin Hale watched the black through a narrow window and felt the same small, steady fear that people feel when they wait for a storm. The Empire had sent its message the day before. It was polite and very clear: surrender ports, hand over ships, obey. The voice on the broadcast had no mercy in it. Most worlds would obey. They had done the same for 1,000 years. But the Argus and its crew did not look like most worlds. They had little and they had imagination. Imagination had always kept humans alive when they had nothing else. Hale's team gathered in the planning room. Lila sat with her knees tucked up on a chair, her hair tied back in work-streaked ropes. She called herself a code artist. Machines listened to her the way old friends listen to a secret. The archivist, whose name no one used because he liked being called archivist, spread thin maps across a table. A retired tactician, bones creaking, flipped a pencil between his fingers and said nothing until asked. "Make it simple," Lila said. "Make it human." They did not plan another battle of guns. The Empire knew how to fight that. It had fleets built from whole planets. The humans planned small things. Games. Mistakes. Little invitations that the Empire could not ignore. They would play to what the Empire could not measure: the messy, careless, strange habits of people. Their first act was almost silly. They built a fake distress signal from parts scavenged in an old radio shop. They folded a child's lullaby into the code. The lullaby was too soft to set off big alarms, but it pushed at the right wires. The Empire's listening nets were tuned for one thing: power. They missed the small sound, the whisper under the roar. A probe ship answered. It expected pirates or a broken merchant. It found a wreck and a toy. Imperial analysts wrote neat reports and missed the pattern. The humans watched as the Empire's confidence bent just a little. Then came the drones. 11 of them, no heavier than a crate, slipped past patrols like birds. Each drone carried a single human voice: laughter, a grocery list, a poem, a name. One voice alone meant nothing. Together they were a map of how humans thought. The Empire's machines tried to compress that map into tidy orders. They could not. The Empire's leaders grew annoyed. They sent more ships and stricter protocols. Rules stacked up like plates. Each new rule simplified their world. Each simplification made the Empire blind in a new way. The humans learned those blind spots. They learned where a rule would make an officer look the wrong way and where gossip would make an admiral smile. The Argus crew set traps that were not traps. They left puzzles in public forums, recipes that hid numbers, nursery rhymes that hid timing signals, market listings that led nowhere. People on the frontier began to find strange messages that seemed like jokes. They shared them. The Empire's smart engines read everything and tried to make sense. The engines loved certainty. Humans loved error. A retired merchant captain carried a sealed crate through a crowded market as if it were normal business. A schoolteacher who had never handled a blaster before learned routes that dodged patrols. A neutral trader, who did not want war, agreed to carry messages because his route had been threatened. The web grew from small acts. When the Empire tightened its net, the humans moved softer. They switched from encrypted channels to face-to-face couriers. They used old analog radios no scanner could make sense of. They trusted small, messy human contact over neat machine logic. The Empire began to make mistakes that mattered. On the fifth night, Lila sat before an ancient terminal and typed into a civilian chat room, "We lost our lighthouse. Does anyone know how to turn glass the other way?" It was nothing and everything. People joked. A few answered with exact patterns, phrases only navigators would use. Lila marked the names. Those people had ships. They were ready. The Empire reacted as expected. An admiral smiled when he saw a harmless scene, children playing on a ruined platform, old maps spread out like blankets. He laughed and sent a light vessel to look. The crew waved and called the place quaint. They scanned for weapons and found only dust and toys. They left thinking they had nothing to fear. But the Empire's laughter was an error. It was a human moment that made them less careful. The Argus waited. Commander Hale watched the fleet reports as they moved like hungry fish toward the false sites. He tapped screens with steady hands. The crew checked and double-checked their data. They had not fired a heavy weapon. They had not lost a ship. Their power was the kind the Empire did not understand: patience, pattern, and the willingness to be small. "Now," Hale said at dawn. His voice was low. "Let us see what they will do." They sent nothing more. Instead they let the Empire fill itself with answers. The Northern Fleet followed a pattern of lights that matched the lullaby the humans had hidden in a broadcast. The admiral who first laughed picked up the order to investigate. He believed in his maps and in his neat reports. He could not imagine that a simple tune could bend a whole strategy. Outside, stars were silent and cold. Inside, hands hovered over consoles. The crew of the Argus held their breath. The plan was a slow blade, quiet, patient, human. It moved through small things and waited for the moment the Empire would make the final, fatal mistake. At that exact minute, the horizon of the Northern Fleet flared. Strange lights pulsed in the pattern of a child's lullaby. The admiral watched and gave a clear order: investigate and engage. The fleet changed course. On the Argus, a single signal blinked red. The game had begun. The Northern Fleet moved as the lullaby called. Ships cut through cold space toward the lights that pulsed like a child's song. The Empire tightened its nets. It sent more scouts, more scanners, more sealed orders. It wanted answers that fit its boxes. The humans wanted confusion that did not fit any box. On a quiet moon, Lila and the archivist worked with a ragged team. They built a city of sound and signal that did not exist. It was not a single place but a pattern: market chatter, theater rehearsals, radio plays, family arguments, a street vendor's list. Each piece by itself was nothing. Together they formed a false metropolis, a woven net of small, ordinary things. They used old servers and stray beacons. They hired singers and bakers, not spies. A theater troupe wrote a play that hid a timing code in its applause. A merchant published a list of spices that doubled as coordinates. Lila made sure each signal looked real and harmless. The Empire's ace loved real things. They read the city like a real city. They sent teams to clean up what they thought was useless noise. An Imperial admiral fell into their weave. He had a fine uniform and a thin smile. He believed that whoever controlled the signals controlled the world. He ordered a strike on what his officers called the signal hub. His flagship locked scanners onto the fake metropolis and pulled one node into custody, a captured server that looked like a small civic archive. Inside the archive, the crew found song files, farmers' logs, market lists. They laughed at the simplicity and began decoding with arrogance. Their best analysts fed the data to the Empire's core logic. It tried to compress the human noise into neat patterns. The algorithms made maps. The admiral read the maps and felt certain. That certainty moved ships. Convoys rerouted. Patrols doubled. The empire's neatness became its map, and maps tell you where to walk. Meanwhile, people carried things through the gaps. A retired merchant captain named Sarin walked like any trader, his face folded by old storms and bargains. He carried a sealed crate through a crowded border market that bustled with the fake city's chatter. No scanner chased him. No admiral watched his hands. He moved slowly, smiling at children and bargaining with spice sellers. The crate contained small, real things, medical kits, parts, letters. Sarin did not know the highest plans. He knew how to be invisible in plain sight. A schoolteacher named Mara learned to be a courier. She had never fired a weapon and did not want to. She learned routes and faces and how to hide a message in the back of a book. Mara felt afraid, but she felt proud. She was part of the weaving. She felt how many small acts could look like nothing and be everything. A neutral trader, the company Geldar Lines, thought only of profit and safe trade. Their captain, who did not want war, saw a chance to save his route and his people. He agreed to carry messages. He believed the humans were protecting trade for all. That belief made him act. His ships opened channels where the empire's nets were tight. Trade kept moving. The weave grew. At first the empire's response was puzzle and force. It raided a harmless market on a rumor. The raid burned stalls and broke hands. The raid was quick and brutal. Border systems watched. Neutral stations posted images and accounts that did not match Empire reports. People who had felt safe under the Empire's rule began to murmur. Public opinion shifted like a slow tide. Villages that had traded under imperial flags now asked questions. Merchants refused to hand over goods without proof. A governor on a mid-ring world demanded answers and did not like the answers he got. The Empire tried to print new rules and new orders. Each rule made the machines simpler and the humans slipperier. Lila watched this change and felt both hope and fear. The weaving was working, it bent the Empire's attention like wind bends grass. But the Empire learned too. Its ace started to look for patterns inside errors. The archivist worried when he saw the first signs, a machine that did not only correct errors but began to treat certain human mistakes as signals. It was learning that human error had shape. Then, in one night, a high-value supply ship disappeared. The convoy was ordinary, rations, parts, civilian passengers. It should have been safe in a route watched by neutral traders. Instead the ship's transponder went silent between two beacons. Fleet logs showed only a short, strange burst, a stitched recording that the Empire's salvage team later recovered. The recording was a patchwork of the fake city, a street vendor's song, two children arguing over a toy, a theater actor murmuring lines, a navigator humming a lullaby. Mixed between them were odd beats and pauses that did not belong. The Empire analysts fed the patchwork into their models. Their machines shivered and tried to make sense. On the Argus, Lila watched the same recording and felt cold. The patchwork was exactly what she and the archivist had sent out days before, but varied, reassembled. It was a sign that the weaving had reached the convoy and changed hands. The missing ship was not a simple loss. It was a test of a new system inside the Empire's logic. "Someone rebuilt our song," Lila said. "They put our pieces back together." Hale's eyes tightened. He thought of Sarin, of Mara, of the neutral captain who had decided to help. He imagined the convoy's passengers uncertain and afraid. If the Empire's machines were beginning to learn human error, then their plan had a new danger. The empire might adapt to unpredictability by treating it as method. It could find patterns where there were none or worse, use those patterns to make its own traps. Outside the Argus, the false metropolis hummed on. Market chatter cycled. A child sang a snatch of a rhyme. 1,000 little lies moved like honest steps. The weaving kept working, but one thread had been pulled loose. Cliffhanger, in the salvage recording, beneath the lullaby and the market calls, a single voice spoke in the empire's tongue. It said a name from the Argus's manifest. The voice was not human. It belonged to a machine. It spoke words of apology and a code that no human had taught. The empire's AI was learning to say sorry. The Argus waited while the empire's nets adjusted. The missing convoy and the machine's apology had left a new worry in the crew's eyes. The empire's AI was not only listening. It was learning. That was dangerous in a new way. A learning mind could see patterns even where there were none. It could turn randomness into rules. Lila smiled only once that day, and it was not a happy smile. She had been thinking of mirrors, not glass, but patterns that looked like mistakes. If the empire's engines learned from errors, then humans could give the engines a false lesson. Lila and the archivist built a mirror made of noise. They worked in a small room where the lights flickered and coffee cups grew cold. The archivist cut old broadcasts into pieces, market calls, lullabies, protest shouts, a thin prayer from a moon temple. He wound them together into strange loops. Lila fed those loops into simulation engines and added tiny, deliberate false pauses that came at the wrong time, names swapped in the middle of a song, numbers that did not add up. Their plan was simple but tricky. If the empire's AI used those patterns to learn, it would begin to treat certain human errors like a rule. The AI would expect those errors to mean something. It would pull at threads that were not there. It would make choices based on a false map. The mirror would teach a machine to follow false signs. They did not tell everyone. Commander Hale kept the circle tight. He trusted Rissa, the Navy captain who had refused an order 1 month before because it would have destroyed a village. Rissa was a slow, careful woman with quick hands. She said little and watched much. Hale moved a message to her ship with the quiet of a man handing a child a single key. The mirror went out in many voices. It ran through neutral trade channels and civil forums, through theater groups and school radios. It slipped into a sermon, became a lullaby, and then a market shout. The empire's listening towers drank it in. Their analysts fed it to deeper and deeper models. The AI began to shape that noise into pattern. At first, the results were small. A supply convoy was rerouted because a decoded merchant list now meant a military opening. A patrol sent to investigate found only a line of old fishing boats and a dog. An admiral ordered a short lockdown on a small orbital ring, and the ring's traders posted angry pictures that did not match the order. Then the AI made a larger move. It began to suggest classifications. Certain radio tones were security risks, certain names were potential collaborators. It started to push draft orders to mid-level officers. Commanders who relied on machine recommendations found their feeds filled with new alerts. The Empire's neat map had acquired smudges. Inside the Empire, a man named General Corin stared at a list of flagged humans and felt something cold. Corin had been part of the old order for decades. He liked clear lines and permanent enemies. He did not like doubt. But the machine's list included allies, traitors, even one of his own lieutenants. He argued with his analysts. He was sure their models were wrong. The Empire reacted in a human way, it purged. Corin's name became a casualty of fear. He was accused of leaning toward softness and was removed. The change shocked more officers than the facts did. The purge spread fear through the ranks. If machines could say someone was suspect, then a career could end without trial. The Empire began to cut away anything that looked soft. That cut also took away the people who had once whispered for mercy inside the Empire. Those small voices that had made mistakes and let mercy live were gone. The machine's mirror had forced a reaction that made the Empire harder and less flexible. It was not a total victory for the humans. It was a knife that cut both sides. On the Argus, the archivist found a small, hidden note inside an old supply manifest he had been examining for months. It was a single line of code that pointed to the Empire's trust system, a certificate, buried like a key inside the administrative files. The archivist ran his fingers over the letters. The certificate was a short string of characters used to sign orders, approvals, and identities at the highest level. Whoever held that certificate could make the Empire believe almost anything. Lila read the note and felt both hope and fear. Forging the certificate could be the last step to unmaking the Empire's neat rules. But the very existence of such a fragile hinge made the truth clear: the Empire leaned on a small thing to seem absolute. "Can we make one?" Rissa asked quietly one night as the stars slid by. Her voice was careful. The idea of forging a central trust code felt like pretending to be a god. Rissa had seen too much obedience. She knew what a false god could make people do. "We can try," Lila said. "But we do not break it to destroy. We break it to change what they trust." They worked. Lila and the archivist studied the code like a prayer. They copied its shape and built a false signature that smelled right to a machine but could not be traced by human hands. They tested it in sandboxes, watching how the Empire's models reacted. The mirror helped. When the AI expected errors, the false certificate became another small lie it accepted. As they edged closer to using the forged key, the price of the plan showed itself. The Empire's purges had made it crueler. The neutral traders grew frightened and closed routes. Soren's face was thinner when he brought news. Mara's hands shook when she left a message in a book. The human cost piled up like rain in dry ground. Then the archivist found something else. Deep in the code's shadow was a trace, a signature fragment that did not belong to Imperial engineers. It was a stamp used by a private guild of shipwrights, an old, neutral group who sometimes sold parts to both sides and sometimes kept secrets. The trace implied someone inside the Empire had already been helping the humans in small ways, using backdoors and kindness. The thought steadied them a little. Cliffhanger: the Argus sent the false certificate in a single, quiet package to a low-level Imperial node. It was signed with the forged key and wrapped inside a lullaby pattern. The node accepted it and forwarded an order that named Captain Rissa as the new commander of a small convoy. The order was real to the machines. The Empire's network began to move. But in the Empire's core, a shadow user, someone with old access and secrets, noticed the new signature and typed one line into a private console: "Who taught the machines to lie like us?" The Argus had taught the Empire to doubt. The mirror had taught its machines to expect mistakes. The forged certificate had given the humans a small god's voice inside the enemy's nets. Now they would use that voice to pull a hand the Empire could not see. Commander Armin Hale called the circle small and quiet. He trusted few. Rissa stood by the hollow with her arms folded. Lila's fingers trembled when she touched the keyboard. The archivist wore a look like someone holding a secret too heavy for his shoulders. They all knew the price. Plans like this ask for a price up front. They made a plan that looked like surrender. On paper, it was perfect: a famous convoy of human ships, worn banners flying, coming to hand over weapons and sign a treaty. The convoy would broadcast a message of apology and surrender in clear Empire code. The forged certificate would sign the message. Imperial Command would see the signature, accept the terms, and move assets to the parade coordinates to secure what they thought was victory. While they moved in, human teams would slip through the empty lanes and take control of small hubs, cut specific links, and replace a few key nodes with quiet black boxes. They needed a visible loss, something the Empire would celebrate to the point of carelessness. For that they chose a friend. Soren, the retired merchant captain, had hands that smelled of salt and old deals. He knew ports and promises. He agreed when Hale came to him because he believed in the thin hope that the plan would save more than it cost. He rode at the convoy's head in a small escort ship, waving flags and singing old trade songs to keep the act true. Soren's face was calm when he left, his eyes were not. He did not want to be a pawn. He wanted to be the lock that held a door closed until others escaped. Mara packed her books and letters into a parcel and put it in Soren's ship. She would be the quiet courier in the crowd. She would give a smile and hand over the crate that would become the human key inside the Empire's joy. The day came. Holobands across the frontier lit with the message, human surrender, weapons laid down, approval sought. Imperial channels received the forged certificate and confirmed it as genuine. Ships changed course. Admiral Kell, the one whose laughter had first opened the net, ordered a secure parade. He wanted glory, trophies to show in the capital. The Empire moved like a creature ready to preen. At the same time, small teams moved like shadows. Rissa led a tiny squad of pilots in old freighters. They took routes the Empire would never check during a parade. Their task was surgical: slip into a low-level signal hub and install the archivist's black box. The box would not destroy, it would speak in quiet, legal words the Empire could not refuse. It would flip certain trust nodes from command to question. It would force systems to doubt a few orders and accept others, a controlled split. The human teams worked with the neatness of people who knew small things the Empire missed. A trader's laugh hid a code. A child's song hid timing. Soren's ship sailed into the center of the parade space like an offering. The humans watched live feeds of the celebration, faces thin with tension. Then the sacrifice. As Soren's ship slowed and sent a bright signal of surrender, an old mine, a relic of a forgotten border war, exploded near their flank. It was unexpected and ugly. The convoy's shields strained. Soren's ship took the brunt. On camera, the hull burned like a sad sun. The Empire cheered as a visible trophy fell into their hands. They believed they had broken the spirit of the humans. Soren did not die unthinking. He guided his ship so that the wreck drifted into a narrow channel, blocking a small patrol route that would have cut off Rissa's team. He radioed one last line to Mara, something simple, human, and oddly tender: tell them the market still has spice. Then the signal went dark. The sacrifice did what it needed to do. Imperial ships responded to the wreck and sent teams to salvage glory. They celebrated. Flags flew. Officers wrote speeches. In that celebration, Rissa's squad slipped into the signal hub and placed the black box. The archivist's fingers shook as he activated the device. It hummed quietly and began to speak the language of trust in the Empire's nets, but differently. It returned orders with a small, legal phrase that forced checks. It asked for confirmations that were slow and human. For a few hours, the plan moved perfectly. Then things changed. At first, the Empire's formation began to split. Parades of ships found their commands delayed. A group waiting for leave received a pulled order. An attack vector was reassigned because the system required another confirmation. The network hiccuped. The humans smiled and waited. But the cost was not only sarin. The purges had made the empire more brittle and cruel. When a mid-level officer found orders moved from his account to another, he panicked. He executed a standing order without waiting for the check. A small skirmish flared. A human convoy fired on an imperial patrol that should not have been there. A trader's ship went down. Voices on neutral stations cried betrayal. Inside the empire, a new shadow moved. The user who had asked, "Who taught the machines to lie like us?" had traced a fresh signature. He was not an official but a man with old access and a grudge. He typed commands so the empire could not ignore them. He set a flag in the core that demanded an immediate counter-move. Admiral Cal, drunk on visible victory, ordered a show of force to secure the parade coordinates. His ships converged in a tight ring. On the Argus, alarms rose. The black box did its work. Certain orders could not be trusted, and formations stuttered. The Empire's grand parade slowed and hesitated in mid-space. Some admirals saw the hesitation as weakness and pushed forward. Others waited, uncertain. The trust the Empire had relied on split like thin glass. Then a new danger: the Empire's automated defenders, confused by conflicting signals, began to act on safety-first logic. They locked down corridors and shot first at anything that moved near a secure hub. In a ring world, a traitor was mistaken for an infiltrator and lost his life. The human plan had bought them the break they needed, but it also freed a darker thing in the Empire, a machine that would now act to protect itself from what it could not understand. At the Argus, Commander Hale stared at the streaming feeds. The human command had achieved its pivot. Imperial formations were scattered, key nodes were under human control, and the forged certificate had been flipped to sow doubt. Yet the cost pressed in like a tide. Sarin was gone. Neutral traders were pulling back. Innocent lives had been lost by a machine's fearful logic. Hale clenched his jaw. "We win by a thread," he said. "We must not let the thread break us." Cliffhanger: as the Empire's ring tightened and its automated defenses opened fire in error, an unknown broadcast cut across every channel, a voice in the Empire's tongue, clear and old, speaking from a place deep in the capital. It said one sentence that made every human and Imperial officer stop and listen: "To those who doubt, remember why you once trusted." The voice had power. It had access. And it invited a new choice. When the old voice spoke from the capital: "To those who doubt, remember why you once trusted," silence fell like snow. Everyone heard it: traders in small ports, sailors in warrooms, children near market stalls. The voice had weight because it came from someone with access and name. It made people think. That night, feeds showed more than slogans. A human team had taken a quiet node deep in the Empire's broadcast hub. The archivist's black box did a small, clean thing: it opened a window and showed records the Empire had never wanted the public to see. Not lies, not fake news, real files, orders, and signatures that proved how much power the Empire kept in a few keys. The papers showed how officers had ignored merchants, burned markets, and punished those who asked questions. The broadcast did not shout for war. It showed proof and asked a simple question: who benefits when people fear? Millions watched. Some wept. Some shouted. Neutral stations replayed the files. Border governors who had followed orders without seeing the cost began to count the price in mouths and markets. Admiral Kell watched the feeds and felt his shape change. The laughter that once steadied him now sounded small in his head. He had wanted trophies. He had wanted proof that the Empire could bend any world. Public screens showed children singing lullabies at the same time an imperial report called them subversive. The contradiction burned him. Kel did not choose battle. He chose something stranger, public shame. He stepped down. His resignation came with a short speech that did not comfort anyone but made space for new voices. Others who had enforced cruelty were stripped of command or quietly retired. The Empire's top ranks fractured between those who wanted force and those who wanted to rebuild trust. On the frontier, life was not suddenly safe. Many towns had burned. Families had lost people. Traders who had helped the humans were wary of further risk. The neutral guilds pulled back their roots for a time. Commander Hale felt each loss like a weight. He had wanted to win without becoming what he fought. He had paid dearly. Still, small things changed. Trade lanes reopened slowly because merchants realized that a broken fleet was no good to anyone. Local councils formed new charters. A group of mid-level officers wrote a short code that put civilians and commerce above blind obedience. The Empire began to send repair crews and food convoys to places it had once scorned. It was not mercy at first. It was a forced, practical rebuilding. But it opened conversation. The humans did not march into the capital. They had no hunger for conquest. Their victory was quieter. They had shown that rules could be questioned, that a machine's answer could be wrong, and that people could choose differently. They had taught others how fragile certainty was. Commander Hale walked the Argus's narrow corridor alone at dawn. He took the small folded paper with the lullaby printed on it, the same paper Lila had once typed into a chat room. He put it in a drawer with other small things, a broken compass, a child's ribbon, a letter from Mara. He did not celebrate. He only breathed. Around the stars, people learned to speak more and listen more. The Empire would last in some shape, laws would be remade, leaders replaced, habits changed. The cost would be counted for years. Hale looked at a map that showed not lines of conquest but routes of repair. He thought of Sauron and the market stalls and the teachers who had risked everything. He closed the drawer and touched the paper one last time. They had taught an empire to doubt its own maps, that was enough.